I never imagined my marriage of 24 years would end with a stranger's voice handing me a secret. 2 weeks after my husband's funeral, Joshua, I sat in a wood-paneled office that smelled of dust and grief. Mr. Winters, my husband's attorney, slid a small brass key across the desk. A maple leaf dangled from it, heavy, foreign, unwelcome. Beside it, a sealed envelope in Joshua's precise handwriting. To Catherine, after my death. My breath caught. Joshua had only ever made me promise one thing in our marriage. Never go to the farm, Catherine. Promise me. And now, the very first thing he left behind was the key to that forbidden place. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I remember staring at the key as if it were an object from another life. The maple leaf charm swung gently as though stirred by an invisible wind. It was the weight of 24 years of questions I had never dared to ask. I pressed my palm against the desk, needing the solidity of the wood to ground myself. The air was thick, stale, as though even the room knew it was holding its breath for my reaction. Mr. Winters cleared his throat softly. He was a reserved man, the kind who seemed carved out of paper and ink, more comfortable with contracts than with grief. His eyes did not linger on me. They hovered on the key, then on the letter, as if his role ended with passing them forward. Yet he said quietly, Catherine, there is more you should know. The words echoed inside me. More? I had already lost a husband to a heart that betrayed him in silence. What more could there possibly be? I forced myself to open the envelope. Joshua's handwriting curved across the page, precise and deliberate, as it had always been when he left notes on the kitchen counter or holiday cards in December. But this was different. This was a confession written for the moment when he no longer existed. My dearest Catherine, if you are holding this letter, then my time has ended. I am sorry for the years of silence, for the things I asked you not to question. The farm is yours now. It is a part of my past I tried to bury, yet I could not keep it buried forever. I bought it back, and I made it into something else. Please, go there once. See it before you decide what to do. I have arranged everything so that it belongs to you alone. Love always, Joshua. I closed my eyes, but the tears would not fall. They had already been spent at the funeral, in the empty bed, in the stillness of mornings without his voice. This was different. This was anger wrapped in sorrow. Why would a man who promised me honesty keep such a place hidden? Why would he demand a promise never to go there, only to gift it to me in death? I looked at Mr. Winters. His face was expressionless, but his tone carried weight. Your husband bought back Maple Creek Farm in Alberta 3 years ago. He arranged for all taxes to be paid for 5 years in advance. According to his wishes, the deed transfers to you, effective immediately. The words stumbled in my ears. Alberta, Canada. It felt as though Joshua had lived a second life just beyond the horizon of our marriage. Mr. Winters continued, there is one complication. His brothers have filed objections to the will. They claim Joshua was not of sound mind when he repurchased the property. Given recent developments in that region, his voice trailed off. Recent developments? I asked. Oil. The single syllable landed like a thunderclap. Deposits were discovered nearby 18 months ago. The property is now considered highly valuable. Energy companies have already made inquiries. I let the words hang in the stale air. Oil, wealth, land. Brothers contesting the will. It sounded like a plot from a novel I might assign to students back when I taught English, not the life I had lived in the suburbs of Minnesota with a quiet engineer husband. I whispered more to myself than to him. Joshua never mentioned oil. He never even talked about the farm. He only ever said, never go. Mr. Winters nodded gravely. Nevertheless, the farm is yours now. I picked up the key. Its cold weight pressed into my palm like a judgment. I turned it over, the brass catching a glint of the dim office light. The maple leaf swayed once more. It was then that Mr. Winters leaned forward, voice lowered. Catherine, I must be honest. This will not be simple. His brothers are determined. But remember, it is not about money. It is about his will. His words sliced through me. It was not about money. It was about his will. Joshua's will. The one thing left in his control. I tucked the letter back into its envelope, slid the key into my purse, and rose to my feet. The chair creaked as though protesting. My legs trembled, but I stood tall. "Thank you, Mr. Winters. I will go." The hallway outside his office was long and dim, lined with portraits of men long dead, their faces as stern and unreadable as the life Joshua had concealed. Each step I took echoed with the question I could not silence: who was the man I married? At the airport, I held the key in my hand while waiting to board. Passengers bustled around me, speaking into phones, corralling children, sipping coffee from paper cups. I was a widow holding a brass key to a place I had never seen, promised I would never see, yet destined to confront. As the plane lifted off, the engines roared like a verdict. The city below shrank into patches of gray and green, while the horizon opened into the unknown. I closed my eyes, clutching my purse, and whispered to myself, family secret, inheritance dispute, hidden legacy. The rhythm of the engines steadied into a heartbeat. In that steady hum, I realized what frightened me most was not the farm, nor the brothers, nor even the looming battle over oil. It was the possibility that I had never truly known Joshua at all. I turned my face to the window. Clouds swallowed the sky, blank and endless. Somewhere beyond them lay Maple Creek Farm, the forbidden place, and the answers Joshua had locked away. The plane cut through the clouds, and with it, the life I thought I understood slipped further behind me. The iron gates of Maple Creek groaned as they swung open, and I felt the kind of shiver you get when you cross a threshold you once swore you never would. The late afternoon sun poured across the gravel drive, gilding the rolling hills beyond, and there in the distance rose the farmhouse. Whitewashed, perfectly kept, with wide windows glinting back the light as though it had been waiting for me all these years. I slowed the rental car almost to a crawl. Every inch forward was heavy with hesitation and yet threaded with a strange pull, like a string tied to my chest. I parked at the foot of the steps and sat for a moment with the engine running. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. This was Joshua's forbidden place, the place he told me never to visit. And yet he had rebuilt it, left it, and now passed it to me with that brass key that still felt too heavy in my purse. I switched off the engine and stepped out. The air smelled faintly of pine and autumn leaves. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the whinny of a horse. My heart clenched. Joshua never cared for horses. That was my love, not his. The front door loomed tall and freshly painted, the kind of careful restoration that doesn't happen overnight. I slid the brass key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as though it had been used often. The door gave way with a soft sigh, and I stepped into a silence that felt alive. The great room opened up before me. Exposed beams stretched overhead. A stone fireplace anchored the space, but none of that held my gaze. My eyes darted from wall to wall. Everywhere there were horses. Paintings of stallions at full gallop, mares with foals nestled close, sculptures carved in bronze and marble capturing muscle and movement mid-stride. Photographs framed in black wood showed breeds I had once adored in magazines but never touched in real life. For a moment, I could not breathe. Horses had been my passion long before Joshua, long before Minnesota, long before motherhood. As a girl, I sketched them endlessly in my notebooks. As a young woman, I saved pennies for riding lessons I could rarely afford. Life had pulled me toward practicality. Marriage, bills, my classroom, raising our daughter. I had let the dream go quietly, the way women so often do, telling themselves it was childish to hold on. And yet here, in this house, Joshua had resurrected it in secret. I pressed a hand against the wall, steadying myself. My eyes burned, but no tears fell. It was too overwhelming for tears. My husband, who had told me never to come here, had filled every inch with the very thing that defined me. Why? My gaze finally landed on a desk pushed up against a wide window overlooking golden pastures. On top of the desk rested a silver laptop, closed, and across it, a single red rose lay with deliberate care. The petals were still fresh, as though someone had placed them there yesterday. My knees weakened, and I gripped the edge of the desk for balance. Joshua. Even from beyond the grave, he was orchestrating. I lowered myself into the chair, fingers trembling as I opened the laptop. The screen flickered alive, glowing with an almost eerie immediacy. No password prompt, just a simple folder labeled, "For Catherine." I clicked. Hundreds of files appeared, each named with a date, stretching 1 year into the future from the day after his funeral. I opened the first. The screen filled with Joshua's face, not the pale, worn version from his final months, but vibrant, healthy, the crooked smile that had always disarmed me. "Hello, Kat. If you are watching this, then I am gone, and you have stepped into the place I once swore you would never see." He chuckled softly, as if sharing a private joke. "I should have known you would not resist, not when Winters placed the key in your hand." I lifted a hand to my mouth. His voice was clear, his eyes bright. It was as if he sat across from me in the flesh. "I made these videos for you," he continued, "one for each day of your first year without me. A year of me keeping you company, of explaining what I could not when I was alive, starting with this place." He leaned closer to the camera, expression sharpening. "Legacy isn't money. It's a possibility." The words hit me in the chest. "Legacy isn't money. It's a possibility." I whispered them under my breath, tasting their strangeness. For years, Joshua and I lived modestly, comfortably enough, but never with excess. I had accepted that was our life. And yet here was a farm restored, art commissioned, land purchased, taxes prepaid. Possibility. In the background of the video, I glimpsed the very room I was sitting in, only less furnished, mid-renovation. He had been recording in secret all along, weaving a tapestry for me to uncover after his death. I let the video run until his face faded to black, then closed the laptop gently, as if afraid to break the spell. I sat there in silence, the rose's fragrance mingling with the faint smell of varnish from the restored wood. My fingers traced the edge of the laptop, circling the embossed logo, grounding myself in the tangible. Then, without warning, a sound cut through the stillness. Tires crunching on gravel outside. My head snapped toward the window. The drive that had been empty minutes ago now carried the slow approach of another vehicle, dark, unfamiliar. My heart thudded against my ribs. I rose quickly, my chair scraping across the wooden floor. The laptop remained open, Joshua's words lingering in the air like a ghost. I pressed the rose to my chest, staring out the window as the car rolled closer. Whoever was coming, they were not here to admire the horses. The weight of the brass key in my purse felt suddenly like both shield and burden. My husband had left me more than a secret. He had left me a battlefield. The knock at the door was not polite. It was sharp, deliberate, the kind of sound that demanded obedience. My pulse leapt into my throat. Through the tall front window, I saw them clearly. 3 men stood on the porch, their shoulders squared, their features achingly familiar in a way that twisted my stomach. Joshua's brothers. Tall frames, dark hair now flecked with gray, jawlines carved from the same bloodline that shaped my husband's, but there was no warmth in their eyes. Behind them stood a man in uniform, the crest of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police on his sleeve. The sight of authority should have comforted me, but instead it deepened my dread. They had come armed not just with family ties but with the weight of law. The pounding came again. "Mrs. Mitchell, open the door. We have official documents." I stood frozen in the center of the room, the silver laptop still glowing faintly on the desk behind me. My breath came shallow, the rose Joshua had left now trembling in my hand. Instinct screamed at me to hide, to retreat, but something steadier rose within me. Joshua had prepared me for this. He had known this moment would come. I walked to the door, each step echoing against the wooden floor. My fingers touched the handle, but I did not turn it. "Who is there?" I asked, though I already knew. The oldest voice answered, cold and commanding. "Robert Mitchell. Open the door, Catherine. We need to discuss the estate." The officer added, "Mrs. Mitchell, we have a court order to inspect the property in relation to an ongoing dispute. Please cooperate." A court order. My stomach tightened, but I forced my voice to remain calm, slid under the door. There was a pause, then the scrape of paper. I bent, picking it up. The document was heavy with stamps and signatures. Legal jargon filled the page, demanding access to the property, claiming concerns about Joshua's competency at the time of purchase. I folded it slowly, letting the silence stretch. My reflection stared back at me in the brass handle of the door. A widow, alone, being pressed by men who had never once called to console me after the funeral. I called out, "You may wait on the porch. I will return momentarily." I walked quickly back to the study, my hands shaking only slightly. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the desk. There, just as Joshua had promised in his first video, lay a folder, blue, thick, organized with meticulous care. I lifted it reverently, almost fearfully, and carried it back to the door. When I opened the door, the cool autumn air rushed in, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant smoke. The three brothers loomed, their eyes sweeping over me not with compassion but with calculation. The officer stood slightly apart, his gaze steady but impersonal. Robert smirked, though his words carried false civility. "Catherine, this is family business. It would be best to resolve it quickly." I held up the folder. "My husband anticipated this. Every document you need to see is here. The deed, the notarized statements, the bank transfers. Everything proves his full competence and the legality of his purchase." The officer stepped forward, taking the folder from my hands. He opened it, flipping through the contents with professional precision. Behind him, Robert's expression tightened. His younger brothers shifted uncomfortably. The officer's brows drew together as he examined notarized seals, signatures, and certified bank records. Finally, he looked up. "These appear to be in order, Mrs. Mitchell. This property is clearly deeded to you. There is no basis for forcing inspection today. This will need to be pursued in civil court." Robert's face flushed, his jaw tightened as he hissed, "This is outrageous. That woman has no right." The officer's voice was calm but firm. "That woman is Joshua Mitchell's wife, and she has every right." The words landed like a gavel. For the first time since they arrived, I allowed myself a slow breath. I met Robert's eyes, my own steady. "You will not bully me. Not with papers, not with threats, not with half-truths. This is my home now." Silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. Then, with a sharp motion, Robert turned, stalking down the steps. His brothers followed, their expressions grim. The officer handed the folder back to me with a nod of respect. I closed the door firmly, the latch clicking like a verdict. The house was silent again. I leaned back against the wood, clutching the blue folder to my chest. My heart still pounded, but beneath the fear was something fiercer. Resolve. I walked back to the study, set the folder carefully on the desk, and looked at the glowing laptop. The screen had shifted to the folder labeled, "For Catherine." I lowered myself into the chair, fingers trembling as I reached to open it. Joshua's voice filled the room once more, warm, knowing, unshaken by death. "Cat, if they have already come to the door, do not be afraid. I left you everything you need. Every paper, every seal, every truth. Remember, they will fight for what was never theirs, but this farm is not theirs. It is yours." Tears blurred my vision, but I pressed a hand against my lips to keep from sobbing. Joshua had seen this moment. He had written my defense before the attack ever came. I closed my eyes, listening to his voice, steady and sure. Outside, the gravel crunched beneath tires as his brothers drove away, plotting their next move. But inside, I was no longer the woman who walked into this farm afraid. I was Catherine Mitchell, widow, heir, guardian of a legacy not measured in oil or land, but in the will of a man who believed in me. I placed my hand on the laptop, ready to see what else he had left, when the screen flickered and a new file opened. My breath caught again. Whatever secrets Joshua had hidden, he was not finished revealing them. The file that had opened on Joshua's laptop was short, almost cryptic. It wasn't a letter or a recording, just a single sentence written across the screen. Go to the barn. Ask Ellis. Trust him. My hands froze on the keyboard. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, that grief had blurred words into something I wanted to see. But no, the instruction was clear. The barn. Ask Ellis. I remembered the sound of horses I had heard when I first drove through the gates. I had not seen Ellis yet, but Joshua had mentioned him once or twice in passing, years ago, in those rare moments when the farm almost slipped from his lips. Ellis was the caretaker, a man older than both of us, someone Joshua had trusted enough to leave in charge. My heart tightened. Trust. Joshua wanted me to trust him too. I slipped on my coat and walked out into the fading light. The air was crisp, and the sky was painted with streaks of orange and violet. The barn stood at the edge of the pasture, a sturdy structure with fresh paint, its doors closed but not locked. As I approached, the heavy wooden door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was tall, weathered, with hair gone mostly white and hands calloused from years of labor. His eyes narrowed as he studied me. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "You came sooner than I expected." I steadied my breath. "Joshua told me to find you." On his laptop, he said, "You would know." Something flickered in Ellis's eyes, recognition, maybe even relief. He nodded slowly. "Then it's time. Come with me." He led me inside. The barn smelled of hay and horses, warm and familiar. A black stallion shifted in its pen, powerful and restless, its mane catching the last light of day. "Midnight," Ellis said softly. "Joshua named him for you. He knew you loved horses." The name hit me like a wave. Midnight, my favorite name as a girl, scribbled into notebooks filled with horse sketches. Joshua remembered. He remembered and built a life for it here, in secret. My throat ached, but I followed Ellis deeper into the barn. At the far end stood a set of double doors leading to the tack room. Ellis pushed them open, revealing not saddles and bridles, but a steel trapdoor set into the floor. He pulled up the latch, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. "Your husband called it insurance," Ellis said. "I call it the war room." My pulse quickened. I hesitated, but Ellis motioned me forward. I descended the steps, my hand trailing along the cold concrete wall until a switch clicked, and the underground space blazed with fluorescent light. The room stretched wide beneath the barn. Tables were lined with files, binders stacked neatly, and maps pinned to corkboards. It looked less like a farm and more like the headquarters of someone preparing for battle. I stepped forward, my eyes sweeping the room. The largest wall was covered with geological maps. Layers of earth were drawn in color-coded detail, and bright red pins dotted the western edge of the property. I traced the outline with my fingers. That section had been dismissed as useless land, too rocky for crops, too distant for development. And yet here it was, glowing with the promise of hidden oil reserves. Ellis watched me closely. Joshua didn't want the oil for himself. He wanted to protect it from his brothers. They'd have sold it in a heartbeat, stripped the land, and left nothing behind. I shook my head, still reeling. He never said a word to me. Ellis sighed. He couldn't. He knew they'd try to come for it. and he knew the only way to keep it safe was to make you the guardian. I turned the tables, pulling open binders. Inside were records, bank statements, contracts, reports. My eyes widened. They weren't Joshua's. They belonged to his brothers. Transactions that didn't add up, loans secured with inflated values, transfers to offshore accounts. Each file was labeled, cataloged, and stamped with dates, evidence. I looked at Ellis. He collected all this. He shook his head. Joshua did. He spent years building this case. He knew the oil discovery would turn everything into a feeding frenzy. He wanted to make sure you had the truth before they spun their lies. I lowered myself into a chair, my legs unable to hold me. My husband had built a fortress underground, not of weapons but of documents, proof, strategy, preparation. Ellis leaned against the wall, arms folded. They'll divide and conquer, Catherine. They'll go after you first, then Jenna. They'll tell her what she wants to hear, twist her grief, and use her against you. The words cut deep. Jenna, my daughter, my flesh, is still raw from losing her father. I knew how easily she could be swayed by promises of belonging, of family unity. I pressed my hand against the table, grounding myself. I whispered, I can't let them take her. Ellis nodded. Then you'll have to be stronger than they expect. Joshua believed you could be. That's why he left all this for you. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us, casting a harsh glow over the evidence of greed and betrayal. I felt a spark ignite within me. For years, I had been the quiet partner, the supportive wife, the steady teacher. Now, standing in the war room my husband had built, I felt the stirrings of a different role. A guardian, a strategist, a woman with power not of muscle or wealth, but of preparation. I reached for one of the maps, studying the layers again. The oil lay beneath land his brothers had dismissed as worthless. That was Joshua's final stroke of genius. He had let them scoff at it while quietly ensuring it would one day secure my future. I turned back to Ellis. Did Joshua ever ride midnight? Ellis's face softened. No. He saved that for you. He said one day, when the time was right, you'd come. The thought nearly broke me. All those years of silence, of questions swallowed. He had not forgotten me. He had not erased my dreams. He had been building a place where they could live again. I closed the binder and stood tall. The war room was no longer just Joshua's insurance. It was my inheritance. Ellis opened a drawer and handed me a small photograph. Joshua, as a young man, barely 20, was standing beside a horse with fiery eyes. Phoenix, Ellis explained. The first horse he ever loved, long before you. He said it taught him resilience, to rise from ashes. He wanted you to have this. I studied the photo, my husband's youth captured in black and white, determination already etched in his features. I slipped it into my pocket, feeling its weight against my heart. I looked once more at the walls lined with proof, the tables stacked with secrets, the map glowing red with possibility. Preparation was the weapon Joshua had given me, and I would wield it. When I climbed the stairs back into the barn, the light of dusk poured in, gentler than the harsh bulbs below. Midnight snorted, tossing his mane as if to remind me of the freedom waiting beyond this battle. I placed a hand on his neck, whispering a promise only he would hear. I will protect this place. I will protect Jenna. I will finish what Joshua began. As I walked back toward the farmhouse, the sky burned with streaks of crimson, fading into darkness. My steps felt heavier, but not with fear, with resolve, the kind that comes when the truth is finally in your hands. Inside the house, I returned to the study. The laptop still glowed faintly, the folder still open. I sat down, the photograph of Joshua with Phoenix in my palm, and felt the ember of determination flare into flame. The fight had begun, and I was ready. The dining table looked almost ordinary when I set it that evening. Bowls of pumpkin soup released gentle steam. A loaf of warm bread, butter melting into its crust, sat in the center. Candles flickered in glass holders, casting golden circles on the polished wood. To anyone else, it might have looked like an attempt at comfort, a widow welcoming family into her home. But for me, it was a battlefield, disguised as supper. I had called Jenna earlier that day, my voice calm, though my heart raced. She sounded hesitant but agreed to come. She said she missed her father and wanted to see the place he had left behind. I clung to that small crack of hope. But when headlights cut across the drive, I saw more than one car. My stomach dropped. She had not come alone. When the knock came, I opened the door to find Jenna standing there, her hair pulled back, her eyes bright with the uncertainty of someone being pulled in two directions. Behind her were Robert, Alan, and David Joshua's brothers. Their presence filled the porch like shadows too large for the light. I forced a smile for my daughter. "Jenna, come in. Dinner is ready." She stepped forward, but Robert spoke before her feet touched the threshold. We thought it best to join. The family should discuss these matters together. His words carried the kind of civility that hides a knife. I stepped aside, allowing them entry, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. Better to face them here, under my roof, where Joshua's walls still stood watch. We gathered at the table. Jenna sat across from me, the brothers flanking her like sentinels. For a moment, the only sounds were spoons clinking against bowls, the crack of bread being torn. The soup smelled of cinnamon and nutmeg, yet my stomach churned with something bitter. Robert was the first to break the silence. "Catherine, let us be reasonable. We all loved Joshua. He would want fairness. The farm should not divide us." I met his gaze steadily. Joshua made his wishes clear. "This place is mine." Alan leaned forward, his tone smoother, almost coaxing. "We know grief clouds judgment. Think of Jenna. Wouldn't it be better if everything were shared? 3 equal parts. Unity for the family." My daughter's eyes flickered. She looked down at her bread, not meeting mine. My chest tightened. David added that Joshua would not want discord. "Sign the papers, Catherine. Let us carry the burden together." The room seemed to shrink with their voices pressing in, each word a coil wrapping around Jenna, around me. I wanted to scream, to strike the table, but instead I drew a slow breath. Pacing mattered. If I rushed, I would lose her. I asked Jenna quietly, "What do you think?" She looked up at me, then at her uncles. Her voice trembled but carried weight. Maybe they're right, Mom. Dad never talked about this place. Maybe he meant for it to be shared." Her words sliced deeper than any accusation. My own daughter doubting, leaning toward them. I felt the ground shifting under my feet. I reached into my pocket and pressed the small remote Joshua had left me. The lights dimmed slightly, and the laptop screen on the sideboard glowed to life. A video began to play without an introduction. Joshua appeared on the screen, his face illuminated as if he had stepped into the room himself. His voice was calm, measured, full of the authority Jenna had always trusted. "Jenna, my sweet girl, if you are hearing this, it means your uncles have come to you with promises. They may say it is for family, for fairness, but listen to me. This farm was built for your mother. Every wall, every painting, every acre. It is hers alone. Do not let them convince you otherwise. Remember what I always told you, family, is who protects you, not who uses you." The words hung heavy in the air. Jenna's spoon slipped from her hand, clattering against the plate. The sound was sharp, final, like glass breaking. Robert tried to recover, his voice raised. "This is manipulation from beyond the grave. You cannot trust a recording." But Jenna's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Dad knew. He knew what you would try." She turned to me then, her voice trembling but resolute. "Family isn't who uses me, it's who protects me." The candles flickered as though exhaling with her. For the first time that night, I saw clarity in her eyes. The brothers exchanged glances, their confidence unraveling. Robert slammed his hand against the table, rattling the dishes, but the gesture felt hollow. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second puncturing their silence. I straightened, my voice cold but steady. The documents are clear. The will is binding. This farm will never be divided. If you wish to contest, do it in court. But do not come here again to poison my daughter's grief. No one moved. The air was thick with the weight of truth they could no longer twist. Finally, Robert shoved his chair back, muttering curses under his breath. His brothers followed, their steps heavy, their exit graceless. The door slammed, and silence returned. Only Jenna and I remained at the table, the soup now cold, the bread untouched. She reached across the table, her hand trembling, and I took it. For the first time since Joshua's death, I felt not just sorrow, but solidarity. The light above the table flickered once, then steadied, as though the house itself exhaled. I looked at Jenna, saw the glimmer of her father in her expression, and felt the fire within me settle into resolve. When I blew out the candles, the room dimmed into darkness. The fight was not over, but the battle of this night was won. The morning after that dinner, I woke with the taste of ashes in my mouth. The house was silent but not peaceful. It was the silence of aftershocks, when the earth has already cracked, but the dust still hangs in the air. Jenna had left without saying much more than a tight goodnight, and though she had chosen me in that moment, I knew the battle for her heart and loyalty was far from over. Joshua's brothers would not retreat quietly. They would regroup, and I needed to be ahead of them. I made coffee stronger than usual and sat at the desk where the silver laptop waited. The blue folder lay beside it, as steady as a heartbeat. Joshua had armed me with papers, but papers alone would not protect the farm. Oil was not just wealth, it was temptation, danger, a magnet for men who saw land as nothing but profit. I needed allies, people who understood the language of leases, royalties, drilling rights, and environmental law, people who could see beyond greed. That afternoon, I drove into Calgary to meet a lawyer Joshua had worked with quietly in the last years of his life. Her name was Sarah Morton, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of handshake that made you feel she already knew your secrets. We met in a modest office, bookshelves lined with thick binders labeled with cases and statutes. I carried the folder under my arm, the weight of my future in my grasp. She gestured for me to sit. "Tell me what brings you in, Mrs. Mitchell." I laid the folder on the polished oak table and opened it, spreading maps across the surface. Colored lines stretched over 2,200 acres, each section marked with geological notes Joshua had painstakingly collected. I traced a finger along the western boundary, the area marked in red pins in the war room beneath the barn. This is where the deposits are. Everyone else dismissed it, but Joshua knew. She leaned over the map, her brow furrowed. He was right. These readings are consistent. The surveys confirm commercially viable reserves here. She tapped the western tract. This land could produce millions, maybe more. Her words should have thrilled me, but instead, they pressed heavier on my chest. I said quietly, "That is exactly why his brothers will not stop until they own it." She sat back, studying me. "Then you must prepare as if for war. Leverage is knowledge and time. If we control both, we can dictate the terms." The phrase sank deep into me. Leverage is knowledge and time. It was what Joshua had given me in that underground room, knowledge of the land, of his brother's fraud, of his foresight. Now, time was mine to use wisely. Sarah outlined the steps. First, we would solidify the title. Next, we would draft a memorandum of understanding with a reputable energy company, one willing to partner under strict conditions. And then, she looked directly at me. "And we will design clauses they cannot ignore, environmental protections, trusts for local families, long-term stewardship. If they want access, they must respect your terms." I felt a flicker of hope, but also skepticism. Companies cared for profit, not promises. I said. They will laugh at the conditions. They will call me a sentimental widow. Sarah smiled faintly. They will until they see what you hold. She tapped the folder of evidence. Fraud, deception, backroom deals. Do not underestimate the power of what your husband left you. It is your shield. I nodded, the words steadying me. We worked through the afternoon, drafting language, sketching terms. By dusk, we had a plan, a presentation. I would show not only the reserves but also my vision for protecting the land. I was not Joshua's passive widow. I was the steward of his legacy. The following week, we arranged a meeting with representatives from Western Plains Energy, a mid-sized company known for cleaner practices and long-term strategies. I arrived at their headquarters with the maps carefully rolled in a tube, the USB Joshua had left me in my purse, and a heart pounding louder than the elevator doors that carried me up 12 floors. The conference room was sleek, with glass walls overlooking the city, the kind of space designed to intimidate. A handful of executives waited, their suits crisp, their expressions skeptical. I laid the maps out on the table, the bright colors stretching across the polished wood. "This is Maple Creek Farm," I began. 2,200 acres, purchased and held by my late husband. He believed in its potential, not just for production, but for something larger. I slid the USB across the table. One of the men plugged it in. The screen on the wall flickered to life. Geological surveys appeared, layers of earth marked with Joshua's precise notes, then financial models, projections, legal filings, all meticulous, undeniable. The room grew quiet as the data scrolled. Finally, I spoke again. "I am not here to sell. I am here to partner under conditions. If you want access, you will commit to environmental protections, reclamation of land, clean water safeguards, investments in renewable transitions. You will also contribute to a trust that benefits local families and supports scholarships for rural youth." There was a pause. One of the men leaned back, scoffing. "Mrs. Mitchell, these conditions are unusual. They will cut into margins significantly." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "Legacy is not money. It is a possibility. You can profit, yes, but you will also leave a mark of responsibility. If not, other companies will." For a moment, the silence pressed heavily. Then Sarah spoke up beside me. "Gentlemen, you should know this is not a desperate widow. This is a woman who holds evidence your competitors would kill to suppress. Evidence of fraud committed by those trying to seize this land. If you want a future here, it must be with her." The tone of the room shifted. The executives glanced at one another, the weight of negotiation tilting. The scoffing man cleared his throat. "We will need to review, but your proposal is compelling." Compelling. It was not a victory, but it was a step. As the meeting closed, one of the younger executives lingered. He said softly, "Mrs. Mitchell, no one has ever demanded such conditions of us, but perhaps it is time." I left the building with Sarah at my side, the city lights beginning to glow against the evening sky. For the first time since Joshua's death, I felt not just grief, but momentum. Back at the farmhouse that night, I sat in the study, the USB still warm in my hand. The lamp glowed, casting a circle of light over the maps. I whispered to Joshua, "We are doing this. On your terms. On ours." I looked at the photograph of him with Phoenix, the young horse that had once taught him resilience. It felt as if he were nodding from that frozen image, reminding me that battles are not won with brute strength, but with patience, preparation, and courage. I closed my eyes and let the silence of the house settle around me. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I felt ready not just to defend, but to define what would come next. As I reached to switch off the lamp, the USB caught the light one last time, glowing faintly like a spark. I knew the next move was theirs, and I was ready. The day of the meeting arrived with a heaviness that clung to the walls of the farmhouse. I woke before dawn, unable to still my thoughts. The blue folder lay on the desk like a sentinel, the USB beside it, and the maps rolled tightly in their case. Joshua had prepared me for this, but it did not make the prospect easier. His brothers were wolves, and today they would not come quietly. Today, they would bare their teeth in front of witnesses. By late morning, the great room of the farmhouse had been rearranged into a boardroom. The long wooden table was polished, and chairs were placed evenly around it. Sarah sat beside me, calm as ever, a stack of legal documents at her elbow. Ellis lingered near the door, his arms crossed, his presence silent but grounding. I smoothed my skirt, the air heavy with the faint scent of cedar. The sound of tires crunching on gravel announced their arrival. Moments later, the door swung open, and in walked Robert, flanked by his brothers. Their expressions were smug, their suits too sharp for the rustic setting. Behind them came a man I did not recognize at first, but his presence radiated authority. He was tall, clean-shaven, with a silver tie clip that gleamed as he moved. I caught the logo on his briefcase. Northern Extraction, one of the largest oil companies in the region. Robert's voice filled the room before he even Saturday, Catherine. I thought it best we bring in some professionals to help you understand the magnitude of what you're holding. I met his gaze without flinching. This is my home. You are guests here. Remember that. They seated themselves across from me, their confidence palpable. The CEO of Northern Extraction introduced himself smoothly, his tone polished. Mrs. Mitchell, we're prepared to make an offer on your land. Given recent surveys, its value has increased substantially. Our company can ensure efficient extraction, quick returns, and a generous payout for you and your family. Generous payout. The words rolled off his tongue like a promise dipped in honey. I glanced at Sarah, who remained silent, waiting for my cue. I leaned forward, folding my hands. Thank you for your offer, but I have no interest in selling. Robert scoffed. Catherine, don't be foolish. This isn't about sentiment. It's about reality. Do you know how much money is buried under that soil? Enough to change lives. Enough to ruin them, I thought, but I kept my voice steady. This land is not for sale. The CEO's smile tightened. Then, perhaps we can discuss a partnership. We handle everything: equipment, permits, logistics. You simply enjoy the profits. It was then that I reached for the map case. My hands were steady as I unrolled the parchment across the table. The colorful layers spread wide, revealing the 2,200 acres in full. I tapped the western boundary, the red pins gleaming like drops of blood. This is where the reserves lie. Not in the sections you've been circling like vultures. Here. The room stilled. My brothers-in-law leaned forward, their eyes narrowing. The CEO's smile faltered. I continued. Joshua knew this land. He commissioned independent surveys 3. To be precise, each confirmed the reserves here. The land you dismissed as worthless. The land you mocked him for repurchasing. Robert slammed his hand on the table. Lies. You fabricated this. Sarah slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside are the certified reports, notarized and filed. Your accusations hold no weight. The CEO opened the envelope, skimming the documents. His expression shifted from skepticism to calculation. This changes things, he admitted. Robert turned red, his fury palpable. Catherine, you don't know what you're dealing with. Let us handle it, and you can avoid disaster. I met his eyes, my voice cold as steel. We won't be pressured in our own home. At that moment, the door opened again. Another group entered. My heart surged. The executives from Western Plains Energy, the company Sarah and I had courted in secret. Their arrival was deliberate, timed to perfection. The room erupted in tension. Northern Extraction's CEO stiffened, his jaw tightening. Western Plains representative stepped forward, offering his hand to me. Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for inviting us. We're ready to discuss terms under the conditions you outlined. Robert's head whipped toward me, betrayal etched on his face. "You planned this." I let the silence hang, then said quietly, "Preparation is not betrayal, it is survival." The two CEOs exchanged guarded glances, the balance of power shifting before everyone's eyes. Northern Extraction no longer held dominance. They had competition, and worse, they were outmaneuvered by a widow they thought weak. Sarah opened another folder, sliding evidence across the table: transactions, offshore accounts, fraudulent loans tied directly to my brothers-in-law. She spoke with precise clarity. "These are records your own family left behind, Mr. Mitchell. Any further attempts to contest Catherine's ownership will expose you publicly." The silence was deafening. My brothers-in-law sat rigid, fury trapped behind clenched jaws. The Northern Extraction CEO closed his briefcase with a snap, clearly unwilling to swim in such muddy waters. Western Plains team leaned in, already discussing sustainability clauses, trust funds, and royalties. The meeting ended not with shouting, but with the quiet scrape of chairs. Robert stood, his glare searing through me. "This isn't over." I met his gaze evenly. "No," I said, "it's just beginning." The brothers stormed out, their footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. The CEO of Northern Extraction followed, his polished veneer cracked. Western Plains remained, their pens poised, their eyes sharp but respectful. As they began to outline preliminary terms, I glanced at the photograph of Joshua and Phoenix tucked beside my folder. His foresight had brought me here, but my resolve carried it forward. When the meeting finally adjourned, the room was littered with papers, empty glasses, and the echoes of battles fought without weapons. I sat back, the tension draining slowly from my body. Sarah turned to me, her expression a mix of pride and caution. "Today, you proved what Joshua always believed. You are stronger than they ever imagined." I reached for the pen that lay abandoned on the table. It spun once between my fingers, catching the light, before I set it down with finality. The scrape of chairs echoed as the last of the guests left, the farmhouse returning to silence. The war was far from over, but the boardroom ambush had ended with the truth on my side. The studio smelled faintly of turpentine and dust, as though it had been waiting years for me to cross its threshold. Morning light spilled across the wide floorboards, pouring through the northern windows that Joshua had so carefully chosen. I stood in the doorway longer than I meant to, my hand resting on the frame, my breath caught between grief and anticipation. 20 years had passed since I had last lifted a brush, 20 years since color had flowed from me onto canvas. My life had become a composition of routine, instead grading papers, cooking dinners, keeping a family upright while Joshua built his career. But now, standing here, I felt the hush of a different kind of calling. The easel held a blank canvas, tall and unapologetic. A box of paints waited nearby, tubes unopened, brushes wrapped in crisp paper. He had bought everything new, expensive, professional, as if he wanted to erase any excuse I might invent for not beginning again. My fingers hovered over the brushes, trembling slightly. I whispered to myself, "He really thought I would come back here. He believed in me more than I allowed myself to believe in me." I walked to the window. Outside, midnight, the magnificent stallion trotted across the frosted field, his black coat glistening like liquid night. He was Joshua's gift, but also a mirror, a reminder that even after being caged or forgotten, freedom still existed. The sight of him stirred something in me that had been buried: a wildness, an unspoken hunger for expression. I sat down on the wooden stool, my hand closing around a brush. The weight felt foreign yet familiar, like shaking hands with an old friend after decades apart. The canvas loomed, intimidating in its silence. My first stroke was hesitant, a pale line of ochre against the white expanse. The second came easier, then a third. Soon, shapes began to form, not yet coherent, but alive. The studio door creaked. Jenna peeked in, her hair loose, eyes still shadowed from restless nights. She smiled when she saw me with the brush. "I didn't want to interrupt, Mom, but I had to see." I returned her smile faintly. Sit, watch. This isn't just for me. For a while, we didn't speak. She curled into the window seat, gazing out at midnight as he galloped. My strokes grew more confident, colors mixing, shapes bending into something between memory and vision. The laptop on the desk chimed suddenly, a notification I had come to recognize. Another video. My pulse quickened. I set down the brush carefully, wiping my hands. The envelope taped to the screen, read in Joshua's precise hand, for when Catherine starts painting again. Jenna's eyes widened. He knew. With shaking hands, I pressed play. Joshua's face filled the screen, healthy and radiant, recorded long before his illness hollowed his features. He sat in this very studio, though back then it had been bare. His voice was warm. "Hello, my love. If you are watching this, it means you've picked up a brush again." Tears blurred my vision, his grin crooked. "I always knew you would. Not because I told you to, not because I left you supplies, but because the woman I married never lost her fire. She only put it aside for everyone else." I clasped Jenna's hand. She squeezed back, eyes shimmering. Joshua's voice continued. "The tools aren't the inheritance, Kat. The freedom is. You gave up pieces of yourself for us, but now you can reclaim them. Paint for yourself, not for me. Not for Jenna, not for anyone's approval. That is the real legacy." The words sank deep, striking chords I had muted for too long. My tears fell, but they were not bitter. They were cleansing. Jenna whispered. "He wanted you free." I nodded, staring at the canvas where my strokes already hinted at something alive. Free. The rest of the video was quiet. Joshua leaned closer, his voice intimate. "I believe in you. Always have. Let the light in this room remind you of what you carry inside. And when you doubt yourself, look outside. Midnight will show you. He carries your spirit." The video ended, the screen fading to black. Silence pressed in, broken only by the steady rhythm of midnight's hooves beyond the glass. I rose, taking up the brush again. This time, my hand was steady. The canvas opened to me like a long-lost diary. I painted the curve of a horizon, the blaze of autumn maples, the silhouette of a black horse mid-leap. Each stroke was a confession, each color a reclamation of the self I had silenced. Jenna watched, her expression softening. After a while, she whispered, "I think I understand now why he kept the farm secret. It wasn't about oil. It wasn't about property. It was about this. About you." I paused, my brush hovering. Yes, about the possibility. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The sun arced high, then lowered, casting golden light across the floor. The painting took shape, not perfect, but undeniably mine. It breathed. When I finally stepped back, exhaustion and exhilaration mingled. The canvas was a storm of colors, fiery oranges, deep blues, shadows that hinted at pain, light that hinted at healing. And in the center, a horse broke through the canvas, unshackled, its mane like flames. Jenna stood beside me, her voice trembling. "It's beautiful. It's you." I swallowed hard, whispering, "He saw me," even when I forgot myself. The next days unfolded like a quiet resurrection. I woke each morning eager to return to the studio, to lose myself in colors and forms. Midnight grazed outside, sometimes lifting his head as if to remind me I was not alone. The videos from Joshua became less about instructions and more about companionship. He had recorded stories, laughter, and even songs. Every day a new surprise, every day a reminder that love does not end with breath. But the real twist was not in what he left. It was in what he knew I would reclaim. My voice, my freedom, my ability to create. One evening, as I cleaned brushes, Jenna said, "You seem different, Mom. Lighter." I smiled. I feel different. For the first time in years, I'm not just surviving, I'm living. The studio became a sanctuary. The canvas became confession. Each piece I painted told truths I hadn't spoken aloud: my grief, my resilience, my gratitude. I began to line the walls with them, and the space turned into a gallery of rebirth. The night before the first snowfall, I finished a painting that captured everything: Joshua's crooked smile hidden in brush strokes, the vast Alberta sky, midnight's freedom, Jenna's silhouette standing firm. I laid down the final stroke as the fire in the hearth flickered low. I set the brush aside. My hand rested against the canvas, warm from my touch. Outside, snowflakes began to fall, silent, persistent. The camera in my mind pulled back, framing me in the glow of lamplight, the painting radiant, the windows framing a world remade. For the first time since Joshua's death, I whispered not goodbye, but thank you. The brush clattered gently into the jar. The canvas stood tall, finished yet eternal. The light shifted across the studio floor, carrying me into the next chapter. The snow had been falling since dawn, quieting the world in a way that felt almost ceremonial. I sat in the great room with a mug of coffee cooling in my hands when Ellis came to the door. His expression was grave. "Catherine, they're here, all three of them, and they've brought 2 men with them." I felt my stomach tighten. I had not heard from the Mitchell brothers in weeks. I rose slowly, steadying myself. Let them in, but only to the main room. No wandering. When the door opened, Robert entered first. His face was thinner, his steps slower, his complexion gray under his tan. Alan followed, sharp-eyed as ever, clutching a leather portfolio. David came last, silent and withdrawn, his gaze darting nervously around the house. Behind them trailed 2 strangers, one carrying a medical bag, the other with the stiff posture of a lawyer. Robert lowered himself onto the sofa with effort. "Thank you for seeing us, Catherine." His voice was thinner than I remembered. "I've been diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the same condition that took Joshua." The name landed like a stone in my chest, my husband's silent burden. Now his brother wore it like a badge of inevitability. Robert continued, "My only chance is a transplant. Our family has a rare blood type and tissue markers. Compatible donors are scarce." The doctor cleared his throat. "Based on family records, your daughter may be a strong candidate." The words struck like a slap. "Jenna." They wanted to test Jenna. My voice was cold. "You want my daughter to be tested for compatibility?" Alan leaned forward quickly. "Just blood work, nothing invasive at this stage. If she matches, we would hope she might consider a living donation." Jenna, who had joined me moments before, froze. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the arm of the chair. "Are you serious?" Robert's tone was pleading now. "I know how this must sound, but family is family. Blood connects us whether we choose it or not." I looked at him, at the brother who had tried to strip me of my home, my dignity, my inheritance, and now he dared ask for my daughter's body. Silence thickened the air. Outside, snow tapped against the windows, the world muffled, as though even nature waited for my answer. Finally, I rose. "You want to talk about blood, Robert? Then we will. But first, I have something for you." I crossed to the desk and withdrew a sealed envelope. Joshua's handwriting was precise across the front. "For Robert, only if necessary." Robert's eyes widened when he saw it. His hands trembled as I placed it in front of him. "Joshua left this for you. He anticipated this day." The doctor shifted uncomfortably. Alan and David leaned closer as Robert tore the seal. He read the first line silently, color draining from his face. His lips parted, but no words came. Finally, he handed the letter to Alan, who scanned it, his jaw tightening. David looked over his shoulder. Within moments, all 3 brothers sat in stunned silence. I folded my arms. Someone should tell me what my husband wrote. Robert's voice cracked. "Joshua discovered the truth about our family years ago. Father lied. Our mother didn't die giving birth to him. She left. She started another family. We have 2 half-siblings, both alive, both sharing our rare markers. The doctor's brows shot up. Compatible donors. Alan muttered, "It can't be true." But Robert pressed on, his voice bitter. Father hid them from us. Joshua confirmed their existence with records and a private investigator. He kept it secret, until now. I let the words sink into the room. So, you do have options. You came here prepared to ask my daughter, the niece you tried to manipulate, to undergo surgery. But the truth is, you already have family who might help. The lawyer accompanying them shifted, clearly unsettled. The doctor looked down at his notes. I leaned forward. Start with truth, then ask. Don't take. Jenna's voice was steady, though her eyes glistened. Family isn't who uses me, it's who protects me. The room was still. Outside, the snow continued to fall, the flakes thickening, the sky gray. The silence of winter pressed against the windows as though sealing us all inside this moment. Robert finally lowered his head. Joshua was always the better man. Even in death, he has us cornered. I placed my hand on Jenna's shoulder. This conversation is over. You know where to start. Not here, not with her. Alan gathered the papers in stiff silence. David looked pale, shaken. The doctor and lawyer followed as Ellis escorted them to the door. I remained standing until the latch clicked shut. The howl of the wind slipped through the crack, curling cold against my skin. Jenna turned to me, her face pale but resolute. Thank you, Mom. I held her close. It isn't over, but we are not theirs to claim. The envelope, now emptied, lay on the table like a warning and a promise. Joshua's foresight had once again shielded us. The door stood closed against the storm. The fire hissed in the hearth. I felt the chill of winter, but beneath it, a flicker of warmth. Joshua's words echoed in my mind. Family isn't blood. Family is a choice. And in that moment, I chose. I chose Jenna. I chose truth. And I chose to stand. The great room smelled of wood smoke and turpentine, a mixture of the old hearth and the studio I had come to claim as my own. On the wall, above the stone fireplace, hung the painting that had consumed me for weeks. I stepped back, letting my eyes travel across it as though I were seeing it for the first time. In its layers, the whole story of my life here was written without words. The bottom edge was dark, showing the broken fences and hollow rooms of the farm as Joshua had once found it, a childhood haunted by cruelty and abandonment. The middle glowed with present light, white fences and green pastures, the farmhouse reborn into a sanctuary. And rising above it all, the future shimmered 2 riders moving forward, a woman and her daughter, their faces indistinct but filled with motion, and behind them the faint outline of a man, always watching, always guiding. It was my confession, my testament, and my healing. Jenna stood beside me, her hand lightly brushing mine. She whispered, "It feels alive, Mom. Like Dad is still here." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. My chest was too full. He gave me tools. I chose life. For the first time, the words came easily, and saying them felt like laying down a burden I had carried too long. The day moved slowly, each hour stretched by the weight of memory. Outside, the fields glowed under a wide Alberta sky. The western hills golden in the late autumn Sunday midnight grazed near the fence line, his black coat gleaming. The others stood nearby, tails flicking lazily, untroubled. The quiet of the farm was no longer eerie. It was a living silence, a companion. I sat in the studio with the laptop open. For months, it had been my tether, my bridge to Joshua. Every morning, I had opened a new file, his face greeting me, his voice weaving love and instruction across the void of death. But this morning, when I clicked, nothing appeared. No video cued itself, no envelope marked for Catherine today. The folder was empty. I stared at the blank screen until my reflection blurred through the glass. The stillness cut through me sharper than grief. He had planned it. He had carried me as far as he could. And now, he was leaving me to walk the rest alone. My hands trembled as I shut the lid. Tears rose, but they did not burn like before. They came softer, like rain that feeds the earth rather than floods it. I wiped my cheeks and whispered, "Thank you." Jenna entered quietly. "No video today?" I shook my head. He knew when to stop. He knew I didn't need them anymore. She looked at me, uncertain. "Do you?" I exhaled slowly. "I need to take care of myself now." That's what he wanted. The words felt heavy but right. That evening, we lit candles and ate supper at the long wooden table, not in tension but in peace. The sound of cutlery was gentle, not like the clashing chaos of that family dinner months before. Jenna poured wine and lifted her glass. To Dad, to his legacy. I lifted mine, and to ours. The glasses touched softly. Later, as the fire dimmed, I walked alone to the porch. The air was crisp, tinged with pine and smoke. The horizon flared with orange and violet as the sun sank into the western hills, the very ground that carried oil and promise, the very ground others had tried to steal. It was beautiful not because of its wealth but because of its endurance. I thought of Robert, Alan, and David, scattered now into silence, their power broken not by violence but by truth. I thought of the letter Joshua had left, the revelation of hidden siblings they had never acknowledged. I wondered if they had found the courage to reach out with honesty instead of greed. Perhaps not. It no longer belonged to me to fix their lives. I thought of Jenna, who had nearly been lost to their manipulation, but who now stood firmly beside me, wiser, stronger, closer. She had seen through their games and chosen the truth. She had chosen me. And I thought of Joshua not as a ghost haunting me, not as a voice locked in a laptop, but as a man who had given me the greatest gift he could. Not the farm, not the oil, not even the paintings he had preserved for me, but freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to live, freedom to become again the woman I had set aside. The porch boards creaked under my step as I walked to the railing. The wind swept across the field, carrying the scent of earth and hay. Midnight raised his head, ears pricked toward me, and I lifted my hand in silent acknowledgement. The canvas inside glowed with new life. The house breathed with memory and hope. The farm stood strong against time and winter. And I stood on the porch, not as a widow hollowed by loss, but as Catherine Mitchell, alive, reborn, whole. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, gilding the fields. The camera of my mind pulled wide farm, hills, sky, and one woman standing steady against the light. Fade to dusk, legacy. Not land, not oil, not even art, but the unshakable truth is that love freely given becomes the foundation of freedom. Tomorrow would come, and with it, new work, new seasons, new choices. But tonight, I let the light linger on my face, breathing deeply, knowing the farm was no longer forbidden. It was mine. And in its silence, I heard Joshua one last time, not in words, but in certainty. "You're ready," I whispered back, "Yes." And I stepped forward into the evening, carrying his love and my own strength into whatever waited beyond the horizon. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.